So, welcome to episode 1 in the series. I'm really excited. Let's get down to business. Here's the thing. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm noticing that Christian entrepreneurs are having this habit where they're tending to look to the left and to the right a lot. They're looking to the left and to the right on how to build the business. And you have to go to God for the blueprint. You can only build with Him, right? But the good news is there's nobody better that you can build with. And I'm gonna prove that to you, right? There's nobody better that you can build with. And we're gonna talk about why it's vital to only get the blueprint from Him. And so you have to be careful when you're looking over there for the sales funnel, you're looking over there for the brand in the box, you looking over here on how to, you're just looking everywhere else on how to do every single thing for your business rather than going to God, who is CEO, to be able to help you and tell you what the next steps are, right? And I know that that's a challenge for a lot of believers because sometimes that feels intimidating when you're still maybe trying to understand God's voice for your life or understand how to hear instruction from God. Like sometimes even hearing the word blueprint sounds like, whoa, that's a level of instruction I don't know yet how to receive from God. And all of those things, like, we're going to be able to break down. And entrepreneurship is vital that we discuss because this is one of the biggest ways that God is platforming Himself and His gospel in order to win souls, to influence people, and to demonstrate His authority and His kingdom on the earth. And so it's vital that we not only discuss it, but that we figure out how to master it. Right. And so I believe what God is doing right now in this season is He's raising up Christian entrepreneurs that are not that old school prosperity gospel bucket. Right. I want to make sure that we're clear on that. Like, this is not prosperity gospel. But it's also not, kingdom kids daycare and heavenly hair and nails. Like, we're not doing that either because, and that's, I feel like I brought that up because that was like an old way that we saw entrepreneurship approached in Christendom, back in the day. But God is doing a new thing and He's raising a new breed. But here's what's breaking my heart and what the Lord has been impressing upon me to address. And that's the fact that there's this massive gap in Christian entrepreneurship right now that's keeping kingdom businesses from excellence and from having the supernatural impact they were actually designed to carry. And in episode 1, I want to give you exactly what that gap is and give you the blueprint that you need to bridge that. So let me paint the picture for you of what I'm seeing, because understanding this problem is the first step in avoiding the trap. So on one side, you have believers that love the Lord with all of their heart, right? They want to hear what thus says the Lord for their lives. And they're going to conferences, not necessarily looking for something, but they're going to conferences to seek God. And while they're there, God will give them a message. Somebody will pray for them and say, woman of God, man of God, I see this on your life. I see a fashion business inside of you. God said you're getting ready to give birth to, and it's going to do this, and that. Oh, woman of God, I see a media, you're going to be a media mogul, and God is going to do this by this amount of time, right? And all of those things are great, especially if they're accurate. Key. um, all of those things are great, but what I'm finding is the problem with that is that at a lot of these conferences, you have, ministers, preachers of all types, teachers of all types, prophetic people, all types, wonderful. But the problem is that they can't give you strategic insight. They're limited on how much they can share with you in business because that's not their area, right? Their focus is ministry, right? Some of them, they might overlap into business, but for the most part, their area is ministry. So they can't teach you creative excellence. They can't tell you what the next steps are to build. They can't tell you what comes after that. They prophesy in part, they give you the word, and then you go and then you got to figure out the rest. So now we have an influx of all these believers going into business and they have God-given visions. But the problem is that they don't know how to move forward with excellence. They got a partial picture. So now they got to run with that partial picture. And that's really hard to do because of the fact that when God gives you something, right, beyond, right, there are some things that God gives you to do, and it's within your own talents. That's usually the first things that God blesses you with in your life, like maybe the younger part of your life, right? God allow you to move within the spaces and places in which you're naturally endowed, like your gifts are naturally in. But then, as you grow, God begins to give you vision for things that are outside of those talents, or that maybe your talents overlap with it, but there's a lot of other things that are new you have no idea how to do. And he knows that. He does that on purpose. The point is that you need to partner with him to get it done. You can't do the vision without him. So that's why you got to be careful looking left and right trying to figure it out, because it's like, well, God, you gave me this big thing, I don't know how to do it. And he's like, yeah, I know you don't know how to do it. You got to come to me for that. And this is why it's important to look back at the template, which is Jesus Christ, right? That's our new covenant template and example. And the good thing that I love about that example is the fact that when you look at Jesus's ministry, it doesn't just apply to one type of ministry. It doesn't just apply to one type of assignment. It applies to every type of ministry and every type of assignment. It literally covers all. Like literally, that's a miracle all by itself, but we're not gonna go there. But what I'm trying to say is we should look at that, right? Because when we look at Jesus, we see that he has a blueprint ahead of time. When he launches out, he's aware of the seasons and times in which he's supposed to be doing things. Now, we don't get insight into exactly how much he knows, and like the background in that, right? But we can infer some things, and we can see that when he fasted those 40 days and those 40 nights, right? And the enemy came to him. The enemy had some understanding of what his assignment was as well. He knew his assignment. The enemy somewhat knew his assignment, right? And the enemy knew somewhat of what his identity was. The enemy also knows what your identity is. He heard that word when you received it, that you were supposed to give birth to so-and-so, right? And so that's why you start to go through some things. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we're going to talk about that too. But it's important to look at the template. Jesus got the blueprint from God as he was launching out. He had that in his hands. And so it's important that whatever God's steps are, he gives you, right? Because God doesn't necessarily always do things the same way. When we look at Abraham, for example, he didn't give Abraham a full blueprint. He said, go to a land in which I'll show you, right? Go where I'll show you where you're going to go. But your job is just one word, go. And don't take nobody but your wife. Ooh, whole different story on that one. But he goes, right? He at least got a beginning of a blueprint. He got his first step. That's a part of the blueprint. But you need that to step out. And that's really important to have, to know what your steps are that you're taking. Do you know what your steps are? Now, on the other side of that, you have believers that are going to conferences that are maybe more business focused, and it doesn't have as much Christian in it at all. So it either will have a little bit of it, like a sprinkle of Jesus, or it won't have any of it, and it's just business focused, and they're bringing the Jesus that's inside of them with them, right? And they are going to get the principles for whatever their vision is, be it a vision that they have for themselves or a vision they believe God has given them. And they're going to go learn the business principles they need to launch. But then what ends up happening is that they're missing the spiritual aspect of it. They're missing the kingdom principles. They're missing the things that's going to help them partner with God and do that successfully, and understand the challenges and the roads that are going to be ahead, so they know how to navigate business in partnership with God. Another thing that I noticed is that those spaces often end up having pitfalls, which is really dangerous for the believer, because you can go into those spaces and what you'll end up finding often is, a little sprinkle of Jesus here, a whole lot of new age and manifestation, other religions that are tied into it, pulling you into mixture. And next thing you know, you mixing a little bit of prosperity gospel, they using some faith language, they pulling in some manifestation and crystals and some, all types of other types of spirituality. And you now have put your business at risk and have contaminated your business by learning under them. Don't forget, this is really important. Sometimes people don't understand or realize that your teachers matter. Your teachers matter to God, right? Study what the New Testament says about teachers. It's very important to know. When you sit up under a teacher, it might seem like it's light, you know what I mean? But there's a reason that the New Testament spends so much time talking about false teachers and the effect it has on the body of Christ. You are going, if you go to somebody and you're learning from them and they're pulling in all kind of new age principles, all kind of other religious principles, and you're tying that in, you're learning from, now I'm not saying that you can't learn anything from any, right? I'm not saying that, right? This is not legalism, but I am saying that you do have to be careful of contamination, because you can go learn from certain teachers, and if they are tied in witchcraft and idolatry, that's where you really get into dangerous waters, right? Because you now open your business and yourself up to things and principles, because they're tapping a lot of times into spiritual principles and pulling that now into business, right? There Years ago, there was a time where business wasn't really pulling in many spiritual practices, but now it's business. I heard this one girl say, business is spiritual, and that's how she approaches it. And I'm finding more and more people approaching business through the lens of spirituality. And so you have to be careful of who your teachers are that you're learning from, because you can very quickly get contaminated. And even if you're not hearing, by the way, you don't have to hear them say something about spirituality for it to get contaminated. By the way, it can get contaminated just by association. But that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. So this is just important for you to know. Be careful of who your teachers are. Another thing you have to be careful of when approaching a business with God from the business side and less from the spiritual side, because I will say that it comes with some heavier pitfalls, is that you have to be careful of going to God for money. And what I mean by that is the idea of using God for money. Sometimes what you'll find in these spaces is propping up of faith, and focusing on what you can get from God, almost as if it's some sort of formula. Listen to me. You cannot use God for money. You can't treat him like he's a cosmic vending machine that you could put Bible scriptures in. You could put affirmations in, which is not even biblical. But you could put spiritual language into it. You're gonna get wealth out of the vending machine, out of your cosmic vending machine. It just doesn't work like that. God is not a genie. But I'm seeing a lot of businesses that are propping God up, using principles from the Bible, using spiritual language, and telling you to use God as a formula in order to get wealth out. And you have to be so very careful that you aren't moving that way. But I noticed that a lot of times when people are approaching it from that business side only, they end up in one of the few lanes where it's mixing certain spiritual practices that are not godly. It's pulling in prosperity gospel or treating God like a cosmic, vending machine, or it's even moving them away from God altogether. And it is just focusing on self and self as God. Like you are dependent fully on yourself to get it done, right? Which is going to lead you nowhere but into pride, honestly. So what you ultimately end up having is one or two things. You end up having the Christian that has the vision and the sincerity, but strategically they end up being weaker, right? Then you have the other side of that, where you have the person that has the strategic focus, but spiritually they end up compromised, or they're missing biblical principles that they need to partner with God, right? And ultimately, both sides produce the same result, unfortunately, which is Christian businesses or Christian entrepreneurs, I should say, that are called to excellence, but They're kept from excellence and the supernatural impact they need to carry to be successful and that they were designed to carry. But here's what's missing from both sides. Let's take it to the Old Testament for this, right? Have you ever paid attention to the fact that when the Israelites were fully walking with God, right? They weren't in rebellion, they were in absolute alignment with God, that the other nations could completely see that the presence of God was with them and that the presence of God was bringing them victory and protection. As a result of that, they respected them. There was a certain level of awe and wonder around God's people. You knew if God is with them, don't touch them, don't mess with them. God is with them, right? That is something that comes alongside working with God. And really, that's what should be marking your business today. When people see your business and they encounter your work, they encounter your products, they sense something's different. When they see your brand, something's different. They are struck with awe and wonder. They know, wait a minute, this business isn't like all the other businesses. It's not like everything else. And to take it deeper, when you think about the Israelites, right, they were constantly looking around. Oh, they got a king. We want a king too. Oh, look how they do. Oh, they serving those guys over there. We want to serve those guys too. And God was like, have you ever heard of a nation switching their gods? Like, make it make sense, honey. Like, sometimes it's like we as Christians do not understand what we're sitting on and what we have. The creator of the earth is backing you. The creator of the earth that's outside of time, matter, and space is with you. You don't need to look at nobody else. Please stay focused. Keep your eyes on the Lord, right? There's no need to look at anybody else. So when they encounter your business, it should be marked. Your business should automatically be marked. People should be able to look at your business and know, wait a minute, like I've stepped on some other territory. This is a woman of or a man of God, a person of destiny. Like when people see you, they see destiny. When people see your business, they see greatness or they see what it was assigned to do. What is the assignment to do? What's the mission? What's the point? Why did God give it to you? And ultimately, when they encounter your work or your products, your service, they should know this is different from everybody else. Even if they can't put their finger on why, they just sense it inside of themselves because they themselves are made in the image of God. Even if they're not walking with him, they recognize when they see a fingerprint from him and they see a story being molded together by him. It strikes them with awe and wonder. They see supernatural distinction when they see you, right? That's what your business, your kingdom business should be giving. If it's not giving that, we got to go back to square one and figure out where did we go amiss? So before we go any deeper, I figured I should introduce the business side of myself. So I run a studio called Salea. Salea.agency is the URL. And I am in business also. I'm a kingdom entrepreneur. I am in ministry more traditionally as well, online ministry. Like God has anointed me in numerous areas, which I'm really, really thankful for. But what I do is I work in branding. I've been formally trained and educated in design. I am a multidisciplinary designer. I am a creative director. I work across the entire what we call like a brand world or brand ecosystem, and I've been trained across many areas of design. And so what I've done over the years is I've worked with Fortune 500 brands from Amazon to Sephora, many brands that you've heard of, household names. But I've also worked for medium-sized brands and small brands, which I really, really enjoy. And what I'm very passionate about is helping kingdom businesses reach the place in which God has called them to reach, but to do it with excellence, right? That reflects the kingdom of God and really shows that you've been marked. And so this is actually my space. And I'm excited to be talking about it. But I'd say the key difference with me and my agency is that we don't just do branding. Any project that I start, I have to first hear a yes from the Lord on that project. I don't just take any client. And then when I move forward with the client that I get a yes on, we're moving forward. I'm going to move forward with prayer. I'm going to move forward with direction and vision from God. And every single move that we make is going to be with wisdom, is going to be with knowledge, is going to be often is going to be prophetic vision that I'm getting for that business. And what ends up happening as well is I'm making sure that everything we produce is through a lens that I would say is from heaven, and that is really really important. I love the work that I do because I am able to work directly with founders. That's probably my most passionate work, is when I can work with the founder. I love working with stakeholders. I love working with, C-suite leaders within a company. But I find that the most impactful work is the work that I can do with founders, because they're receiving the vision on what it is that they are trying to do in the earth. And that is important to me because I also, as a visionary, I'm going to be working with God on where it is that you should be going. And when we come together, it often is just fireworks. And we are able to get so much done, and I'm able to help them make greater impact, and they walk away with so much more. It's not just it's not just a transactional project, right? I tend to help them as a midwife, and give birth to what they need to in business and in that assignment. And so that looks a lot different than, I would say, most of my peers, where the project is, and nothing's wrong with that, right? Because this is just the normal way to do business, right? But my peers who, they're taking a project on, it's going to be a bit more transactional, or maybe it'll be focused on the relationship long term, but around the projects of that company, where yes, I'm focused on projects, I'm focused on branding, I'm focused on whatever it is that business is doing, but there's a much deeper aspect and transformative aspect that's coming out, where usually by the time that founder or those founders are finished on the path with me, we have reformed a lot, and they are walking out with identity they didn't even realize they were missing. It's funny because I can remember when God first gave me the dream to launch the studio, and I was still working a full-time job. It was very much a place that it was cushy and comfy, and, no reason to leave, working in corporate. And I can remember I had a dream about helping, in fact, a kingdom entrepreneur that was based in Harlem. I'll never forget it. The dream was of an older woman who was making muffin cookies. And it was so funny because at the time she was making these muffin cookies, it was either a concept that was really new and I barely knew anything about it, or I hadn't seen it before. Anyway, I remember it being like so unique, these types of cookies that she was making. And so the Lord in the dream basically had me consulting her and teaching her how to grow the business, right? And how to scale up the business, how to get clientele, how to look more professional, how to actually build a real kingdom business his way. And I was teaching her that in the dream. And then I'll never forget, I woke up and then I heard the Lord say in my ear while I'm laying in bed the word go. He said, go. And I was like, whoa. And it was like I don't know how to describe it, but a feeling that was overtaking me where he was releasing me. It was like a feeling of release, go. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I got a full-time job. But the funny thing is, God was preparing me for the 6 months before that, was slowly showing me and saying, I started to get prophetic words. Soon you're going to leave your job. Soon God is going to exit you from your job. And I was just like, for what? Like, because I had gotten so, comfortable in the space that I was in. and that I wasn't really thinking that hard about entrepreneurship, even though I naturally have always been an entrepreneur, have always done entrepreneurial things. So I was like, when he said it's time to launch out, I was like, okay, I had to like readjust my mindset. But I listened, I obeyed. Obedience is very important. We'll talk about that. But what I ultimately ended up doing is I turned in my 2 weeks notice like pretty quickly after that. And I just went through. And that's how I can tell you working with God is not linear. It doesn't usually look like just a straight shot up. Now, this was my second business that I had launched. My first business was pretty linear. It went viral very quickly. It shot up on the internet fast, made me successful, like kind of an overnight success. So I thought, okay, going back into business with God would look just like that. It was just going to be quick success, right? But this time, God taught me so much more, and it was valuable to learn that walking with God doesn't always look linear, just just a straight shot. It has ups and downs, it has peaks and valleys, and it's very important to understand those markers in your business so that you can know how to navigate and also not give up, but understand that these are simply growing pains. And so I'm excited for us to go on this journey together, because God has not only blessed me, bless my business, but I'm hoping to be able to take some of my learnings and give them to you, that it may bless you. Okay, now that we've diagnosed the problem, we can start looking at some solutions, and we can actually observe what it means to have God as CEO of your business. Not just a consultant, not just an advisor, a random advice giver, but the chief executive officer of your business. So I think we should go back to Jesus, because he's the most accomplished human being that's ever walked the earth. That's not an opinion. That is fact. Let's look at John 5:19. It says, "Very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees his Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does." You know, it's funny, because according to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, Jesus was completely unqualified. He had no formal rabbinic training, no priestly credentials. He just had a standard Jewish education from a small town in Galilee, right? But don't let that stop you there, because many people stop there. They stop there because they think, oh, God qualifies the unqualified. But what I noticed a lot of times when people recite that, not all the time, okay? So no shade. But sometimes I notice that when people recite God qualifies the unqualified, that they stay within this space of appearing unqualified, right? They don't go get the training that they need. Now, sometimes you gotta pay close attention to what God is saying, because God might not want you to go get formally educated in something, or God might want you to go get formally educated in something. That's why it's important to hear what God is saying. But I can guarantee you this: he does want you to become excellent. And Jesus's teachings, well, they were so excellent and so profound and so anointed that his enemies could not even stand him, yet they couldn't dismiss him, because God himself was qualifying him. And then Jesus turned around and studied to show himself approved. It tells us he grew in wisdom and stature. That tells us he didn't just rely on his divinity. He studied. And so we should be like our template. If God truly has called you to build a business in a particular industry, he will qualify you in that industry. Now, I want you to notice something with Jesus. Even though he didn't qualify, quote unquote, on paper the way they did, he was more excellent than all of them combined. And what that tells me, and should tell you, is that though God qualifies you, It's never an excuse to be mediocre. If God is calling you to compete in a space where people are highly educated, highly qualified, highly experienced, highly talented, it's going to be vital, very much vital, that you are bringing that same level of excellence to the work. And I got to tell you, it's not always easy doing that. In fact, it's not easy at all. Because, like I mentioned before, when God calls you to do something, right? The first time He calls you to do something, it might be within your area of genius, within your sphere of genius. But the next time He asks you to do something, and maybe even the first time He asks you to do it, often you cannot accomplish it. It's too big. The vision is too big. You cannot accomplish it without Him. So don't get too excited, because one of the things that they don't tell you at those conferences, right? They do not tell you how hard it might be. They don't talk to you about the peaks and the valleys. They tell you uh they tell you about that mountaintop experience. They tell you about that pinnacle experience, but they don't tell you what is going to be on the way. But this reminds me so much of Hebrews 12 when it talks about Jesus and how he had to look at the pinnacle moment in order to help him get across the hard parts of his ministry. And it said, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. He focused on the joy that was before him. It wasn't immediately before him. He was going to have to traverse and trek a very hard journey to get there, but he put his eyes on the prize. He set his eyes on the high calling of God. He set his eyes on God himself, did what he told him to do, said what he told him to say, and nothing else. Following God in business is not linear. It's not just a straight line to success, a straight line from vision to success. It just doesn't work like that. And the people that have that story, they're outliers. Or that was like the very first, assignment God gave them in business. But typically it doesn't work that way. Okay. So this is important to know, because when you're starting out or you have a new business and it's just not looking like how you pictured it, you understand that, one, you shouldn't despise small beginnings, right? You're going to start small. And if God told you you're going to have, a multi-million-dollar business, more than likely in the very beginning, you're going to suck at business. That's right. You're going to suck at business. You're going to mix your personal and your business finances together. You're going to make all kind of foolish mistakes because you don't know yet, right? You don't know what you don't know. And you're learning. You're learning. If God tells you that you're going to be, you're going to have a film company and you're also going to be a top actress. Okay, when you start, you're going to be off wet film. You're going to suck at being an actress. You can just bet your bottom dollar on that. It just is what it is. It is what it is. If God tells you you're going to be a best-selling author, you're not going to be a great writer at the beginning. It is what it is, right? If God tells you, I want you to start, I don't know, let me stop. Because I can go down a rabbit hole of like how bad it's funny, because whatever God tells you, you're going to be, right? You're going to be this thing and then you're going to be so great at it. In the beginning, more than likely, you're going to be absolute garbage. Dumpster juice. And again, if that's not you, more than likely you had some overlap with your sphere of genius when he gave you your assignment. There was some overlap in your sphere of genius, but a lot of people that God is sending out there, he's having them launch things in areas that's not within their sphere of genius, or it's not yet in their sphere of genius. God is going to teach them and give them what they need over time. But in the beginning, they're going to, it's kind of like your walk in salvation. You start out kind of like as a baby making mistakes, then you move on to toddler stage, right? the thing is, business, anything with God often works that way. He enjoys watching us go through the growth process. He enjoys watching us go from baby, up to toddler to child, to adult. Like God enjoys that growth process as a father. And so you shouldn't despise your small beginnings. And it's important to know God is not just building a business through you, He's building you through that business. He's going to use that vision to refine you, transform you, develop your character. See, at those conferences, they prophesy about the destination, like I mentioned, but the journey is often missing. They'll tell you about the wealth, but what they don't tell you is about those wilderness seasons, right? It's so funny because sometimes we look at the big preachers and pastors, and sometimes people really fought them for going and buying expensive shoes and expensive car. But if you saw some of their journeys, you would understand why God would bless them in that way, because they had to go through so much to get to that point. There might have been a period where they didn't have shoes to wear, they were walking barefoot. You just don't know. They go get a beautiful car because there was a point where they were homeless, and God decides to bless them and says, go get that car. I know for me, I have a testimony where God blessed, where I was actually looking for the economical option of a car, and God said, that's not what I want you to drive. I want you to go get the thing you're dreaming of. And I was like, well, God, I had all these excuses, and He said, go get the thing you're dreaming of. And then I said, okay. And when I literally tried to get the economical car and couldn't get it, everything I tried didn't work. I said, okay, I'm just going to go look at the dream car, like He said. And then when I went to look, guess what? Got the best deal ever. Best deal ever. So sometimes it's easy to judge from the outside looking in, but you have no idea what a person went through to get to where they are. But when God is the CEO of your business, you will operate under His authority and His structure, no questions asked. When He tells you to say no to that contract, you'll do it. When He tells you to say no to that partnership or aligning yourself with that other business, you'll do it. When He tells you to partner with this person, when He tells you to mentor that one, you'll do it. You'll do whatever He tells you to do. And He's worthy, because when He tells you to turn down something, He's doing it for your good, or He might be testing you to see if your heart is really with Him. As we close, I want to challenge you to think thoroughly about your business. Are you going to be like the Israelites in the seasons with God, where they're walking in alignment with Him and their heart posture is for Him, where all they're doing is looking toward Him, and all the other nations are in awe because the hand of God is on them? Or are you going to be like the Israelites in their seasons of rebellion, where they're looking from the left to the right, trying to see what all the other nations are doing, who the other nations are worshiping, right? Which category are you going to be in? Because it determines whether you have a business of mediocrity. For those who make the decision to truly operate with God as their CEO and pursue excellence as worship to God, you're going to build for kingdom impact, and you're going to step into supernatural favor over your business that sets you apart in your industry, in the ministry and assignment that God is giving you. People going to look at your business and they're going to wonder, what's different about them? Like, I can't put my finger on it, but something about them is different. And you're going to know it's because the hand of the Lord is upon your business. And that is your time also to share and shine the light on Him, because ultimately you cannot forget, you are not just in business to make money. You are not just in business for that. You're in business because you're on a kingdom assignment, and a kingdom assignment is missional. And that mission is what comes first. All the rest of it are blessings that God adds. So if this is giving you real value today, please leave a comment, like and subscribe. Let me know. I'm really, I don't want this to just be inspiration, but I want it to be a place where you can transform your business. And I want to hear all about how this has affected you. Until next time, thank you for tuning in to Liberation Live, and I'll see you on episode 2. Oh my God. And before I forgot to say, don't forget to share this with founders that you know. Any kingdom builders that you know that are working on building a business alongside God, partnering with God. God is their CEO. This is going to be important for them to have. And if this was valuable to you, share it with them if you care. All right. Until next time, I'll see you in episode 2.